Ernesto and Athena need somewhere to stay, Dad. They're moving into your place. I set my coffee down slow so my hand wouldn't shake. My place, Connor? You barely use half of it, he said, not looking at me. It's practical. That's when I knew this wasn't his idea. Connor didn't have the spine for this kind of ask. Someone else was standing behind those words. My name is Andrew. I'm 64. 8 years ago, I buried my wife Marissa in the ground below the house we built together with our own hands, plank by plank, in the Colorado mountains outside Ridgeway. That house isn't property to me. It's the only room left where her voice still lives. And if I say no, I asked. Connor didn't answer right away. He started pacing my kitchen like he'd rehearsed this in the car. Dad, come on, think about it logically. 4 bedrooms, 2 people, you're up there rattling around by yourself, and meanwhile Ernesto and Athena are stuck paying rent on a place that's fallen apart. It doesn't make sense. It made sense to your mother and me, I said. We built every wall in that house. I know, and nobody's saying tear it down. I'm saying let people actually live in it. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, leaning in like he was closing a deal. Look, Alice's parents helped us out a lot when we bought our first place. You remember that. Ernesto co-signed for us. It's just returning the favor, except it's your house doing the returning. My house, I repeated, not yours to give. I'm not giving it, he said, voice climbing a notch. I'm asking you to share it. There's a difference. Is there? Because it sounds like you already told them yes before you told me. He didn't deny it. That was the answer. Dad, you're making this harder than it needs to be. It's a big house. You could take the east wing, they take the west. You wouldn't even have to see each other most days. I don't want to divide up rooms in my own home like it's a rental unit, Connor. Well, maybe that's the problem, he snapped, and then caught himself, softened it. Sorry, I need this to work. Ernesto's been talking to me a lot lately about family, about how everybody's supposed to pull together. And I get it, I do. He's not wrong. He's not your father. No, but he's Alice's, and Alice is my wife, and this matters to her. He rubbed his face. Look, I already told them it was basically settled. If I go back now and say no, it's going to be a whole thing. Athena already started measuring curtains, Dad. They're excited. They measured curtains for a house they don't own. Because I told them it was fine. He was almost shouting now, catching himself again, dropping his voice. I told them it was fine because I thought you'd be reasonable about this. Reasonable, I said. You mean agree? He stopped, exhaled hard. I need you to not make me look like an idiot in front of my in-laws. Do you understand what that's like? Every time we go over there, it's a comment. Oh, Connor's dad has all that land and won't share it. Must be nice to sit on a house that size alone. Ernesto brought it up at Thanksgiving in front of everyone. I sat there with nothing to say. So the answer was to say yes for me. The answer was to fix it, he said, and this fixes it. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw someone negotiating a business deal, not asking a favor from his father. And if I still say no, that's when his tone changed, flatter, colder. Then maybe you go stay in the city for a while. Give them space. It's not like you're up there doing anything but sitting with the memories. Sitting with the memories, like Marissa was a hobby I needed to be talked out of. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit there long enough that he started fidgeting, refilling his coffee he didn't want, checking his phone he didn't need to check. I'll think about it, I said, but I'd already decided. I found out later it was Ernesto who'd planted the whole thing, told Connor at dinner, in front of Alice, that a real man doesn't let an old widower sit on prime mountain property while family struggles for a roof. Connor didn't have the nerve to say no to his father-in-law's face, so instead he came home and practiced his lines on me, hoping I'd be the easy one. I wasn't going to fight him for it. I didn't remind him whose name was on the deed, whose overtime pay laid every beam in that roof. I packed one bag, left the key on the counter, and drove down the mountain without a word. 3 days later, Ernesto and Athena let themselves in like they already owned it. 10 minutes after that, the whole house went cold, and none of them knew why. If you've ever had someone talk circles around you to take what you built because they think you're too tired to fight back, stay with me. This story is for you. Subscribe, because it only gets colder from here.
Something's wrong with the thermostat. Athena said it like a complaint to a hotel front desk, not like a warning. I wasn't there to hear it. I was 3 hours south, in a rented studio in Monrose, unpacking one bag onto a bed that wasn't mine. But Connor told me most of this later, word for word, like he needed someone else to carry the weight of it too. Ernesto had walked into the mountain house first, hauling 2 suitcases up the porch steps, already talking about which room got the better view. Athena followed with a box of framed photos she planned to hang in a hallway that still had Marissa's photos on it. She didn't take mine down. She just started adding hers next to them, like we were all one family now, like she hadn't just walked into someone else's grief. By 6 that evening, the temperature inside had dropped 8 degrees. "Check the breaker," Ernesto said, flashlight in hand, standing in front of a panel he didn't understand. Nothing was tripped. Every switch sat exactly where it should. He tried the thermostat again. The display blinked once, then read a single word: locked. Athena called Connor first. "Your father's heating system is broken," she said, already annoyed, like I'd personally sabotaged the pipes on my way out the door. Connor called me 20 minutes later. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Dad, what's going on with the house?" "I left it the way it always runs," I said. "It's 52 degrees inside, Dad. Athena says the panel's flashing something. What did you do?" "I didn't do anything to break it. I restricted it." Silence on his end. I could hear voices behind him. Ernesto's voice, low and irritated, asking who Connor was talking to. "Restricted it how?" Connor asked. "There's a system under that house your mother insisted on years ago. It only answers to me. I built it that way on purpose, long before any of this." "So what, you can just turn people's heat off? Is that even legal?" I almost laughed. "It's my house, Connor. My name on the deed. My system. My rules. Colorado doesn't require me to heat a home for people I never agreed to house." "They're going to freeze," I said. "They have a car. There's a hotel 40 minutes down the mountain." "This is insane. You're actually doing this?" "You did this," I said. "I just didn't fight you on it." He didn't have an answer for that. In the background, Athena's voice rose sharp enough that I could make out most of it even through the phone. "Tell him this is unacceptable. Tell him—" And then Ernesto's voice cutting over hers, lower, angrier, saying something I couldn't make out except for my own name. "Dad, please," Connor said, and for the first time that day, his voice lost the rehearsed edge. "It's really cold up here tonight." "I know. I built that house. I know exactly how cold it gets when the system's not running for you." He went quiet again. Then, almost too soft to hear, "Ernesto saying I should have known better to trust you'd be reasonable." There it was. Even now, freezing in my house, Ernesto was still coaching him. "Tell Ernesto that reasonable left the conversation the day he told my son to hand over a house he never built one nail of." I hung up before Connor could answer. That night, alone in that studio apartment, with nothing but a secondhand lamp and a mattress that smelled like someone else's life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt something closer to clarity. For 8 years, I'd let people walk through Marissa's rooms, assuming grief made me soft, made me someone who'd bend if you pushed hard enough. Ernesto had bet on that. Connor had bet on that. They were about to learn how wrong that bet was. At 11 that night, my phone buzzed one more time. Not a call, a text from an unknown number. I didn't recognize it until the second line. "This is Ernesto. Your son's system is illegal, and I will have someone look into it. You have no idea who you're dealing with." I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. He didn't know who he was dealing with either.
Ernesto's text sat in my head all night, so by morning I drove into Ridgeway to see Bailey. Bailey had been our family lawyer since before Marissa got sick. Steady, no nonsense, the kind of person who read contracts twice before breakfast. Her office was above the hardware store on Sherman Street, and when I walked in unannounced, she took one look at my face and cleared her 10 o'clock. Ernesto's threatening legal action, I told her, says my system's illegal. Bailey pulled up the property file on her screen without even asking me to sit. The house is solely in your name. Marissa's too before, but it passed to you outright. Connor's never been on that deed. I know that. He doesn't seem to. Then let me spell it out for whoever needs it spelled out. In Colorado, a homeowner has full right to control utilities and access systems on their own private property. There's no tenancy here, no lease, no rental agreement, nothing that gives Ernesto or Athena occupancy rights. Legally, they're guests. Guests you can restrict access from at any time for any reason. So there's nothing he can do? Nothing that would survive an afternoon in front of a judge, she said. If anything, Ernesto walking in and treating it like his own property without your consent could be argued the other way. I felt something in my chest loosen for the first time in days. That loosening didn't last long. My phone rang before I even made it back to the truck. Connor. Dad, you need to come talk to them in person. This has gone too far. Where? The diner in town. Ernesto wants to talk it out like adults. I almost said no. Then I thought about Bailey's file sitting fresh in my mind, and I thought, fine, let him try to talk it out in front of people. The diner was half full when I walked in. Locals at the counter, a couple of tourists by the window. Connor sat in a booth near the back with Ernesto across from him. Athena beside her husband with her arms crossed like she was already prepared to be offended. Alice wasn't there. That told me something too. I sat down without being invited to. Ernesto didn't waste time. You understand what you're doing is cruel, he said, loud enough that the couple at the next booth glanced over. An old man locking a heating system on people in winter. What kind of man does that? The kind of man who built the system, I said, and the kind of man who never invited you into that house. Connor invited us. Connor doesn't own the house. Ernesto's jaw tightened. You're punishing your own son over pride. No, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm holding him accountable for the first time in his life, and you don't like watching that happen. Athena leaned forward. This is exactly the arrogance I told Connor about. You think because you built something 30 years ago, you get to hold it over everyone forever. I built it with my wife, with our hands, our money, our years. I don't owe anyone access to that because their daughter married my son. The diner had gone quieter around us. I noticed the waitress hovering near the register, pretending to wipe down a counter that was already clean. Ernesto's voice dropped, but it didn't get softer. It got sharper, like a blade instead of a hammer. You'll regret this. I know people. I'll make sure everyone in this town knows what kind of father freezes out his own family. Go ahead. Tell them. Tell them exactly how you moved into a house that wasn't yours and expected me to keep paying to heat it. Connor hadn't said a word this whole time. He sat there between us, staring at his coffee like it might tell him what to do. Finally, he looked up, and for the first time, he didn't look at me. He looked at Ernesto. Maybe we should just find our own place, Connor said quietly. The table went dead silent. Ernesto turned on him so fast his chair scraped the floor. Excuse me? And that's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. Something in the room had just cracked wide open, and it wasn't my doing.
Ernesto stood up so fast his coffee sloshed over the rim of the mug. You don't get to say that in front of me, he said to Connor. Not after everything Athena and I have done for you two. I'm not saying it to hurt anyone, Connor said, and I could hear his voice shaking now, the first real crack I'd heard in days. I'm saying maybe this whole thing was a mistake. The mistake
Ernesto said, jabbing a finger toward me, is letting your father think he can humiliate this family in a diner. Nobody humiliated you, I said. You walked into that yourself. Athena grabbed Ernesto's sleeve, trying to pull him back down into the booth, murmuring something about not here, not like this, but he shook her off. The whole diner had stopped pretending not to watch. Someone at the counter had their phone half raised, not quite filming, just close enough that Ernesto noticed and lowered his voice, though not his anger. You'll regret crossing me, he said to me, low and tight. Then he turned and walked out, Athena hurrying after them, the bell over the door clattering behind them. Connor sat there a long moment, staring at the space where they'd been. Then he put his head in his hands. I don't know what I did. I don't know how any of this happened. You said yes to a man who isn't your father, instead of talking to the one who is. He didn't argue. That, more than anything, told me he already knew. I left him there and drove back up the mountain alone. When I reached the house, the porch light was on. I hadn't set it that way. Someone had been inside since I left. I unlocked the door, and the system flagged it immediately on the panel by the entry. An access attempt, denied, time-stamped from the day before. Ernesto had tried the code Marissa and I used on our first system, decades old, something Connor must have remembered and repeated to him at some point. It hadn't worked. Of course it hadn't. I'd changed everything the week I packed my bag. I stood in the cold entryway and felt something settle in me, quiet and certain. This wasn't about heat or locks anymore. It was about who still thought they had a claim to what wasn't theirs. 2 days passed without a word from Connor. Then, on the third night, a text came through. Not from him, from Alice. Andrew, I think you should know Ernesto's talking about suing you both. He's saying Connor promised the house verbally, and that counts as something. I don't know what to do. Can we talk? I read it twice. Alice, who had never once called me by name in 5 years of marriage to my son, always Connor's dad, now typing my name like it mattered. I typed back one line. Meet me at the house tomorrow, alone. 3 minutes later, her reply came through, and it wasn't what I expected at all. Ernesto's already on his way there tonight. He says he's taking what's his. I didn't wait for morning. I called Bailey from the truck, doing 40 on a mountain road in the dark. Ernesto's headed to the house tonight, I said. Says he's taking what's his. There's nothing of his to take, Bailey said, already awake, already moving. I could hear her keys jingling on her end. If he sets foot on that property without your consent, that's trespassing. If he tries to force entry, that's breaking and entering. I'll call the sheriff's office now and give them the property details so they're ready if you need them. By the time I reached the gate, headlights were already parked crooked in the drive. Ernesto stood on the porch, flashlight in one hand, a crowbar in the other, working at the frame of a side window. Ernesto. He froze, flashlight swinging toward me. For a second, I saw something flicker across his face, not guilt, just calculation, like he was deciding whether I'd actually do anything about it. This ends tonight, he said. I'm done being told my family sleeps in the cold because an old man's got his feelings hurt. Put the crowbar down, I said. You're breaking into a house that was never yours to enter. It's practically my daughter's house. Connor as good as promised it. Connor doesn't own a single board of it, I said, and you know that. You've known it the whole time. You just bet I'd be too tired, too grieving, too old to stop you. He took a step toward the window again, and that's when the headlights swept up the drive behind me. The sheriff's cruiser, no siren, just the slow crunch of gravel and a spotlight settling on the porch. Ernesto's face went from anger to something smaller in about 2 seconds flat. The deputy who stepped out recognized me. Small town. Everyone does eventually. Mr. Hale, everything all right? This man was breaking into my house, I said. I have the property deed and my attorney on record if you need it. Ernesto tried to talk his way around it. Misunderstanding, family matter, nothing serious. But the crowbar in his hand and the splintered window frame behind him did the talking better than he could.
The deputy didn't arrest him that night, just took his information, gave him a formal warning about trespass and property damage, and told him in plain words that if he set foot on my land again without permission, the next visit wouldn't end with a warning. Athena wasn't there to see it. Neither was Connor. But by the next morning, everyone in that family knew, because small towns don't keep secrets, and neither do sheriff's reports. Connor called me 2 days later. His voice was different, quieter, none of the rehearsed confidence that first morning in my kitchen. "Dad, I heard what happened. I figured you would. Ernesto's saying you humiliated him in front of the whole department." "He humiliated himself," I said. "I just stopped covering for it." Silence. Then, "Alice and I are looking at our own place, away from her parents." "Good," I said, and I meant it. "He doesn't expect you to forgive me right away," he said. "I know I let him talk me into something I shouldn't have. I know I told you to leave your own house. I think about that a lot." "You should," I said. "But you called. That's a start most people don't manage." I didn't invite him back up the mountain that week, or the next. Some doors you leave shut for a while, not out of cruelty, but because trust isn't handed back just because someone finally said sorry out loud. Marissa used to say the house would always know who really belonged in it. I used to think that was just something she said to make the wiring project sound romantic. Standing on that porch the night Ernesto tried to force his way in, I understood she'd meant it literally the whole time. The house never let in anyone who didn't belong. It just took the rest of us a little longer to catch up.